Hello students, this is my sixth and final class on the explanation class on the poem The Brook by Alfred Lord Tennyson. In my previous class we discussed three stanzas of the poem, and in those three stanzas, by describing the journey of the brook, the poet refers to the third stage of human life. In that part, the Brook says that there are lots of twists and turns, then there are lots of ups and downs in its journey. Similarly, in the middle age of our life also, there are lots of twists and turns. At one point, we may achieve success. At another point, we have to face failure. Okay, but we have to carry everything, the beautiful as well as the bitter experiences of our life in the journey of life. As the brook carries everything, the dirty things, the beautiful things in its journey, similarly, we have to carry all types of experiences in our life. Okay, now today we are going to discuss the last four stanzas of the poem. So let us proceed to the next stanza of the poem. In stanza number 10, the brook says that I still by lawns and grassy plots, I slide by hazel covers. Here the brook says that I still by. Still by means the brook moves slowly and silently across the lawns and the grassy plots, and sometimes the brook is covered by the hazel trees. The hazel is a type of tree. That means here the brook moves very slowly and silently. That means we can say that now the brook is going through the plains. As the brook is now moving across the plains, across the lawns and the grassy plots, that is why it has lost its speedy, energetic movement. It is now moving slowly and silently. And as I already earlier said, that in stanza number 10, 11 and 12, the poet, by describing the journey of the brook, refers to the old age of human life. And in old age, what happened? In old age, we lose our physical strength. Okay, a person moves very slowly and silently. And here the brook moves very slowly and silently across the lawns and the grassy plots. That means in the old days, like the brook, we human being also lose our physical strength, and an elderly person moves very slowly and silently. And then the brook says that I move the sweet forget-me-nots that grow for happy lovers. That when the brook flows across the grassy plots or the lawns or under the hazel cover, at that time the brook carries the beautiful forget-me-nots. Now forget-me-not is a blue colored flower. It's a very beautiful flower, and the poet says that those flowers grow for the happy lovers. That means the lovers, they used to exchange that flower to one another because it's a very beautiful flower. Now here the brook says that it carries those beautiful forget-me-nots when it moves slowly and silently. That means what? That means the brook appears beautiful when those flowers fall on the water of the brook. And it conveys the idea that even if the elderly people lose the beauty of energy of their life, but still they have their own beauty. As the brook has its own beauty, it may lose its energy, its strength, its power, but still it has the beauty. Similarly, the elderly people also, they may lose their physical strength, but still they have their own beauty of their life. As the forget-me-nots make the brook appear very beautiful, similarly the elderly people also are very beautiful. And it's a fact. If you have your grandparents, or suppose if one elderly person is there in your locality, then you will realize the fact that they have their own glow of life. They have their own beauty of life. We enjoy a lot by spending time with those elderly people. Okay, because they have their own beauty. Now in this stanza, the poet uses one poetic device. Let us come to that poetic device, that is anaphora. And what is anaphora? All of you know, the repetition of same word in two or more consecutive lines. And here the word I is repeated in line number 1, line number 2, and line number 3. Clear, I think, this stanza. Now quickly proceed to the next stanza, stanza number 11. In this stanza, the brook says that I sleep, I slide, I gloom, I glance among my skimming swallows. Now here the brook says that it sleeps, it slides. Sleep and slide means move very slowly, very silently. And it gloom and I glance. Glance means to look. Gloom means with a sad, gloomy mind. So the brook says that when it moves very slowly and silently, when it is traveling across the plains, when it moves very slowly and silently, at that moment the brook glances, looks at what? And how it looks? It looks with a gloomy mind. And it looks at what? It looks at the swallows. Swallow is a type of bird. And these birds, what they do? They fly above the water of a brook or a river very swiftly. The swallows are swiftly moving birds. And the brook says that it looks at those birds, the swiftly moving birds, with a gloomy mind. Why the mind of the brook is gloomy here? Because while looking at the speedy, swift movement of the brook, of the birds, the brook reminds or it recalls the energetic movement, the energy that it earlier possessed. Okay, now this can be related to human life also. As the elderly people, they lose their physical strength, as they can't move swiftly from one place to another place. That is why what happened to them? Whenever they look the young people who are engaged in their daily life with their energy, then with a gloomy mind, with a sad mind, the elderly people look at those young people. The elderly people then they bring to their mind the energy they used to possess when they were in their youths. Okay, so here the brook, by looking at the skimming swallows, swiftly moving swallows, it looked with a gloomy mind. As the elderly people look at the young people with a gloomy mind, because the elderly people lost that energy. Then in the last two lines of the stanza, the brook says, I make the netted sunbeam dance against my sandy shallow. And then the brook says that in that part, when it flows across the grassy plots and across the lawns slowly and steadily, that means when it flows across those plains, then at that part the brook is shallow. Shallow means without any depth. There is no depth in the brook. And then when the sunlight falls into the water of the brook, then it appears that a golden net is dancing on the surface of the brook. And it makes the brook very beautiful. You can realize this if you go to that Bogeyville Bridge in the afternoon time. And if you look at the sky in the west, then you will see at the time of sunset, what happened? The sun rays fall into the water of the river Brahmaputra. And it appears that a net of sunbeam dance on the surface of the water. It is a very beautiful sight. It has an aesthetic beauty. And the brook here says that in that shallow part, when the sunlight falls, it makes the brook appear very beautiful. And again, we can relate it to the elderly people. The elderly people, they are in the last days of their life. But we can't say that their age, the elderly people, they don't have the beauty. They have their own charm. They have their own beauty of their life. That fact has been highlighted in this last two lines of the stanza. Okay, now let us come to the poetic devices used in the stanza. In this stanza, the poet uses two poetic devices. One is asyndeton. I earlier told you that this poetic device is only used by the poet once in the poem. Now, what is asyndeton? Asyndeton is a device where conjunctions, articles, or even pronouns are omitted for the sake of speed and economy. And here in line number 1, this thing has been used. That asyndeton has been used. So here the poet says that I sleep, I slide, I gloom, I glance. Actually, it should be I sleep and I slide, I gloom and I glance. But in order to bring speed to the rhyme, in order to bring economy to the poem, the poet omits that end. Okay, so that is why it has become I sleep, I slide, I gloom, I glance. Okay, this is called asyndeton. Then secondly, here the poet is using alliteration. There are two alliterations used in this stanza. Those two alliterations are skimming swallows and sandy shallow. These are the two examples of alliteration. Okay, I think this stanza is clear to you. Now let us go to stanza number 12. This stanza, the Brook says that I murmur under moon and stars in brambly wilderness. So the Brook says that it murmur. Murmur means a very low, inaudible sound. It murmur under moon and stars. That means at night, when the brook flows across the plains, it produces a sound. What type of sound it produces? It produces a very soft, inaudible sound. And when it produces that sound, in brambly wilderness. Brambly means thorny. Wilderness means trees and the shrubs. So the Brook says that when it flows across the thorny shrubs, then it produces a sound at night. And that sound is a very, very low, inaudible sound. Okay, now here you have to remember that earlier what type of sound the Brook produces? It produces high-pitched shattering sound, babbling sound, but now the Brook is producing murmuring sound. Again, we can relate it to the elderly people. How can we relate it? Because in the old age, the elderly people, they suffer from different types of diseases, and they don't get sound sleep at night. And at night, in pain, sometimes they used to cry. And whether they are able to cry in a loud voice? No, because as they lose their physical strength, they cry in a very low, inaudible voice. They cry in pain in a very low, inaudible voice throughout the night. As the brook at night under the moons and the stars, when it flows across the thorny shrubs, it produces a murmuring sound. It appears that as if because of those thorns, the brook is suffering and it is crying. Similarly, we can say that the elderly people, because of different types of diseases, they suffer a lot. Those thorny, brambly wilderness refers to the diseases of the elderly people. When they suffer from different types of diseases, at night they don't get sound sleep and they cry in pain in a low, inaudible voice. Then in the last two lines of the stanza, the brook says that I linger by my singly bars, I loiter round my cresses. And then the brook says that it lingers. That means it moves about here and there. Linger means to move about here and there purposelessly. By my singly bars. Singly means accumulated mass of stone. I loiter round my cresses. So the brook says that it slowly and silently, purposelessly, linger and loiter means to roam about here and there purposelessly. The brook purposelessly moves here and there slowly and silently. Again, we can relate it to the elderly people. The elderly people also move about here and there. They move about here and there. How? Slowly and silently, and they move about here and there purposelessly. The people of the other stages, the young people, the people who are in middle age, they move about here and there with energy, and they move about here and there with a definite purpose. Okay, but The elderly people, they also move here and there, but they move here and there slowly, and secondly, purposelessly. From one room of the house to another room they may go, from they may go, then from one house to another house they may go, but they go from one place to another place without any purpose. The Brook also says that it lingers and loiters around the singly bars and the cresses. Okay, now let us come to the poetic devices used in the stanza. The poet here uses two poetic devices. Those two poetic devices are onomatopoeia. First of all, what is onomatopoeia? All of you know onomatopoeia refers to the sound words, and here murmur is the word, onomatopoeic word. Second one is anaphora. The word I is repeated in line number 1, 3, and 4. Okay, now let us come to the last stanza of the poem, that is stanza number 13. And out again I carve, and flow to join the brimming river, for men may come and men may go, I go on forever. So here the Brook says that again it takes a curve and it flows with speed and violent motion to join the brimming river, and men may come and men may go, but the brook goes on forever. Now in this stanza the poet becomes a little bit philosophical, as I earlier told you. So the Brook says that at one point, after old days, one life may end, but the process of life is a never-ending process. One person after old days may die, but another person at that moment will come to this earth. And again, in the case of that person, all the processes will again happen. That means, again from childhood till the old age, all the processes will be repeated. So that is why the Brook says that it takes a curve, and again with a violent speed it moves to join the brimming river. And then we come across the refrain of the poem. What is the refrain of the poem? That is, for men may come and men may go, but I go on forever. So this is the refrain, and all of you know the meaning of the refrain, that human life is transient, but the objects of nature, like the brook, will remain on this earth forever. Now let us come to the poetic devices used in the stanza. So the first poetic device is alliteration. Man may is the example of any alliteration. Second is anaphora. Again, man may is repeated twice in line number 3. This is an example of anaphora. Then next is antithesis. Opposite words are juxtaposed. Here come and go is the example of antithesis. And the last two lines of the stanza is the example of refrain. What is refrain? The recurring theme or the recurring lines are known as refrain, and these lines are repeated at a regular interval in the poem in the stanzas. Stanza number 3, 6, 9 and 13. So this is why this is an example of refrain. So this is the explanation of the poem, and I think the poem is clear to all of you. And in this way, very beautifully, the poet describes the journey of the brook, and by describing the journey of the brook, the poet relates it to human life, the 4 stages of human life. I think it's clear to all of you. Okay, so thank you for today, and stay safe. Have a nice day. Goodbye.